In 1913, the state of Pennsylvania declared that disabled people were, quote, unfit for citizenship and a menace to the peace. With those words, they built a place to hide their children. They called it a school. For 60 years, no camera ever got inside, no reporter, no inspector. The gates stayed closed, and the children stayed hidden. Until the summer of 1968, when a 28-year-old journalist named Bill Baldini walked onto the grounds of Pennhurst State School with a film crew. What he recorded over the next 5 days would shock a nation, spark a revolution, and change American law forever. But first, he had to get past the gates. And what he found inside was worse than anyone imagined. This is the story of Pennhurst. The year was 1903. The Pennsylvania legislature had a problem. Across the state, nearly 4,000 people with disabilities were locked in prisons, poorhouses, and insane asylums. They had nowhere else to go. So the state authorized a new kind of institution, a place built specifically for the feeble-minded and epileptic. 5 years later, in November 1908, Pennhurst State School opened its doors in Chester County, about 30 miles northwest of Philadelphia. The sprawling campus covered 1,400 acres of rolling Pennsylvania farmland, red brick buildings with granite trim, a working farm, a power plant, underground tunnels connecting the wards. It was designed to be entirely self-sufficient, a world apart. The stated mission was education and care. Give these individuals skills, teach them trades, help them become productive members of society. That was the promise, but the real mission was something else entirely. Pennhurst was built during the height of the American eugenics movement, the belief that certain people were genetically defective and should be removed from the population. In 1913, the state appointed a commission for the care of the feeble-minded. Their report made the intent clear. Disabled people were unfit for citizenship. They posed a menace to the peace. The commission recommended what they called custodial care. Lock them away, prevent them from having children, break what they called the endless reproductive chain. The institution's own chief physician quoted a leading eugenicist named Henry Goddard in his report to the legislature. Every feeble-minded person, he wrote, is a potential criminal. With that philosophy guiding its operation, Pennhurst was never going to be a school. It was designed to be a warehouse. And within 4 years of opening, it was already overcrowded. The pressure to admit more residents was relentless. Not just people with intellectual disabilities, immigrants who spoke no English, orphans with nowhere else to go, people with epilepsy, anyone society wanted to forget. By the mid-1960s, Pennhurst housed nearly 2,800 people in facilities designed for far fewer. Most of them were children. But here is what makes the numbers even more disturbing. Of those 2,800 residents, only 200 were enrolled in any kind of education or recreation program. The institution called itself a school, but almost no one was being taught anything. There were 9 doctors on staff, 11 teachers, none of them trained in special education. So what were the residents actually doing? They were working. In 1953 alone, Pennhurst residents did £5 million of laundry, unpaid. The Supreme Court would later call this peonage, involuntary servitude, a form of slavery. The children who were supposed to be learning skills for independence were instead laboring to keep the institution running, and the conditions they lived in were getting worse by the year. Staffing was catastrophic. During night shifts, a single nurse might be responsible for more than 100 residents. There was no way to provide individual care, no way to protect the vulnerable from the violent. Bullying was rampant and unpoliced. Physical abuse was documented but rarely punished. Sexual assault occurred in the darkness of overcrowded wards. When families came to visit, they often found their children bruised, drugged, and unattended. The institution would offer vague explanations: falls, accidents, self-inflicted injuries. But the patterns were unmistakable. Some residents who could speak when they arrived lost that ability after years inside. Children who had been toilet trained regressed. People who had basic skills saw those skills disappear. They did not just fail to improve, they deteriorated. The place that was supposed to help them was making them worse. In 1983, 9 Pennhurst employees were indicted on criminal charges: slapping patients, beating residents in wheelchairs, arranging for patients to assault each other. These were not isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a system that had failed completely. But for decades, none of this reached the public. Pennhurst operated behind closed gates for 60 years. Occasional newspaper articles raised concerns. Legislative inquiries were launched and then quietly abandoned. The institution had powerful defenders in state government, and no journalist with a camera had ever been allowed inside. That changed in the summer of 1968. Bill Baldini was a young reporter at WCAU-TV in Philadelphia. He got a tip from a public relations man who worked with local charities. This guy kept telling Baldini about a place called Pennhurst, a hellhole, he called it. Baldini was skeptical, but he made the drive to Chester County to see for himself. When Baldini requested access, he expected to be turned away. Instead, to his surprise, the administration let him in with cameras. No reporter had ever been given that kind of access before. What Baldini filmed over the next 5 days became a 5-part series called Suffer the Little Children. It aired on Philadelphia television from July 1st through July 5th, 1968, and it showed America something it had never seen. Residents tied to beds and chairs, adults confined to cribs, naked bodies wandering through crowded day rooms with no supervision, no activities, nothing to do. Filth, overcrowding, the blank stares of people who had given up. Baldini's opening line cut straight to the point. "We shipped them 25 miles out of town to an institution and forget them," he said, "while they decay from neglect. Zoos spend more on their wild animals than Pennsylvania spends on its 2,800 patients at Pennhurst." Neglect was the message. One moment from the broadcast became famous. The administration tried to use a resident named Abe as proof that people were happy at Pennhurst. They brought him in front of the cameras, expecting him to say how much he loved living there. Instead, Abe said he dreamed of leaving. He said he would love to live somewhere else. The institution's own example had contradicted their entire defense. Abe's answer changed everything. Another child Baldini interviewed was a 12-year-old boy named Roland Johnson. Roland had been admitted to Pennhurst in 1958 because of behavioral problems at school. His teachers did not know what to do with him. Doctors told his parents to institutionalize him immediately. It was the standard advice of the era. Put him away. Move on with your lives. It will be better for everyone. When Roland first saw the massive campus, the grey buildings, the water tower looming overhead, 3,000 people crammed inside, he started to cry. He later wrote that he cried that his mommy was gone and his daddy was gone. He wrote that he would never see his sisters again and that he believed he was there for life. Massive was how he remembered it. Roland was assigned patient number 9134. His IQ was assessed at 53 and he was classified as one of the working boys. That meant cafeteria duty, farm labor, whatever the institution needed. He was 12 years old. Working boys did the work. Roland would spend the next 13 years at Pennhurst. He was bullied constantly. He was beaten by other residents and sometimes by staff. He was sexually assaulted. Nighttime was the worst, he later wrote. Few guards on duty, predators roaming the halls. The trauma would haunt him for the rest of his life. While Roland was inside Pennhurst, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Roland learned about it from other residents. Even locked away, he followed King's story. He would remember it later. The Baldini broadcast shocked Philadelphia. Donations poured in. Politicians demanded investigations. But outrage alone does not close an institution. The gates stayed open. And it would take another family, another set of bruises, and 13 years of legal battles before anything truly changed. There are over 300 abandoned institutions like Pennhurst across America. Most of their stories have never been told. Subscribe and hit the notification bell because we are documenting them all. The family was the Haldermans. Their daughter Terry Lee had been a resident of Pennhurst for 10 years. When she came home for a weekend visit, her parents noticed something wrong. Bruises, unexplained injuries. They asked the institution what happened. The answers were vague, unsatisfying. Terry Lee's mother complained to the superintendent. His response was unexpected. "Call David Furliger," he said, "and sue me." So they did. On May 30th, 1974, attorney David Furliger filed a federal class action lawsuit on behalf of Terry Lee Haldeman and every other resident of Pennhurst. The suit alleged that the conditions inside violated their constitutional rights: the right to due process, the right to be free from cruel and unusual punishment, the basic right to safety. The case went to trial in 1977. Federal Judge Raymond Broderick heard testimony for 32 days. Doctors, nurses, administrators, family members, former residents who could speak for themselves. The picture that emerged was devastating. Conditions at Pennhurst, Judge Broderick wrote, are not only dangerous, with residents often physically abused or drugged by staff members, but also inadequate for habilitation. The institution was not helping anyone. It was a warehouse where people were stored and forgotten. The court found that some residents had actually gotten worse after being admitted. Their physical, intellectual, and emotional skills had deteriorated inside the institution that was supposed to help them. Parents who had been told their children would receive education and care discovered the opposite. Pennhurst was making people sicker, not better. Terry Lee Haldeman herself was learning to talk when she entered Pennhurst. She lost that ability inside. The institution took that from her. Judge Broderick ruled that the forced institutionalization of people with disabilities was unconstitutional. He ordered Pennhurst closed, and its residents moved into community living arrangements, small homes with trained staff, real support, actual care. But the state of Pennsylvania did not accept the ruling. They appealed, and appealed again, and again. The Pennhurst case went to the United States Supreme Court 3 times. It generated over 2,000 docket entries, 500 court orders, and 28 published opinions. The legal battle lasted 13 years. Finally, in 1984, the parties reached a settlement. Pennhurst would close. Every resident would be moved to small community homes with proper support. On December 9, 1987, nearly 80 years after it first opened, Pennhurst State School officially shut its doors. The aftermath surprised almost everyone. Researchers tracked the former residents for years after their release. The results were clear. The vast majority had a better quality of life in the community than they ever had inside the institution. They received more services at less cost. Their skills improved instead of declining. Over 60% of families who had initially opposed the transfers later said they approved of the decision. And Roland Johnson, the 12-year-old boy who cried when he first saw Pennhurst, became something no one expected. After his release in the early 1970s, he spent years putting his life back together, learning to control the anger that Pennhurst had kindled in him, dealing with the trauma and finding his footing in a world that had never made space for people like him. Then he discovered a self-advocacy group called Speaking for Ourselves. For the first time, Roland met other people who had survived institutions, people who understood what he had been through, people who believed their voices mattered. Roland had something powerful, the ability to speak, the courage to tell the truth, the moral authority of someone who had survived the worst and come out fighting. He rose to become president of Speaking for Ourselves. Roland Johnson traveled across America, to Canada, to England, speaking to conferences and government hearings about the rights of people with disabilities. When he spoke, audiences listened, not because he had credentials or degrees, but because he had lived it and because he refused to be silent. He was in the audience at the White House Rose Garden in July 1990, when President George H.W. Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act into law. It was one of the most important civil rights statutes in American history, landmark legislation that protects millions of Americans from discrimination. Roland had helped make it happen. The boy they called patient number 9134 had changed his country. He has been called the Martin Luther King Jr. of the disability rights movement. He died in 1994, but his autobiography, Lost in a Desert World, still tells the story of what he survived and what he accomplished. If the name Pennhurst sounds familiar, there is a reason. In Season 4 of Stranger Things, the show features a fictional mental hospital called Pennhurst. It is directly named after the real institution. The place where Victor Creel is imprisoned in the show draws its name and its atmosphere from the actual Pennhurst State School. The Duffer Brothers knew exactly what they were referencing, a place so notorious that its name alone evokes institutional horror. The real Pennhurst helped change America. It established that people with disabilities have constitutional rights, that institutions are not the answer, and that community care, when properly funded, works better for everyone. But the story does not end there. Today, Pennhurst still stands. What happens there now is something nobody expected. After the closure, the campus sat abandoned for 2 decades. Buildings crumbled, roofs collapsed. The state neglected its legal obligation to preserve the historic property. In 2008, the entire lower campus was sold to a private developer for $2 million. 2 years later, the administration building reopened, not as a museum, not as a memorial, but as a haunted house. The Pennhurst Asylum Halloween attraction opened in 2010. In its original form, actors mimicked people with disabilities. They rocked back and forth. They spoke to themselves. They acted out the symptoms of mental illness for entertainment. The operators used authentic restraints and wheelchairs from the institution as props. Visitors paid up to $50 to walk through wards where real people had suffered, while performers pretended to be mentally ill for their amusement. Cribs lined the walls, the same kinds of cribs where adults had been confined for years. An autopsy room featured body parts. An electroshock therapy scene had actors strapped to tables. History and horror fiction blurred together until visitors could not tell which was real. The attraction grossed $2 million a year. It created jobs. It paid taxes. Local officials saw economic benefits. The buildings, at least, were being maintained instead of demolished. Disability advocates were outraged. The ARC, a national organization representing people with developmental disabilities, called for a boycott. They compared it to building a thrill ride called Escape from the Twin Towers at Ground Zero. The Pennhurst Memorial and Preservation Alliance, founded by researchers and former staff who wanted to honor the residents' memory, tried everything. Protests, zoning challenges, legal action. Nothing worked. One advocate asked a simple question: would you have a haunted house at Birkenau? But here is where the story gets complicated. Management changed hands in the mid-2010s. The new operators toned down the most offensive elements. They partnered with the Preservation Alliance to create a separate museum building. And something unexpected happened. More than half of the performers who now work at the haunted attraction identify as disabled. Some have personal histories of institutionalization. One performer, a young woman named Autumn Werner, who has a connective tissue disorder, became the first Pennhurst Memorial Fellow. She works to preserve artifacts and document the history while also performing as a haunter. When asked about the controversy, Werner said something that captures the impossible tension. A harsh truth we face is that if we do not want this place leveled, we have to do this. The haunted house funds the preservation. Without it, the buildings would be demolished, the history would be lost. A former Pennhurst resident who survived the institution and later protested the attraction put it differently. "We tried to fight it," he said. "We lost." So what is Pennhurst now? A site of conscience, recognized internationally for its role in the disability rights movement. A crumbling campus where advocates fight to preserve the memory of 10,000 people who lived and suffered there. And a seasonal haunted house where people pay to be scared in the same buildings where children were once caged. Pennhurst helped birth the Americans with Disabilities Act. It changed how America treats its most vulnerable citizens. Its legacy includes some of the most important civil rights law of the 20th century. The residents who suffered there did not suffer for nothing. Their pain led to protection for millions of others. Roland Johnson died in 1994. He was only 49 years old. In his final years, he revealed that he had been diagnosed with AIDS, likely contracted during the assaults he endured at Pennhurst. Even facing death, he expanded his advocacy to include people with HIV. His autobiography, Lost in a Desert World, remains a testament to what he survived and what he accomplished. A square bearing his name is part of the National AIDS Memorial Quilt. Every October, people pay $50 to scream in the hallways where Roland once cried himself to sleep. The question is not whether Pennhurst should be remembered. It obviously should. The question is how. Is a haunted house the only way to fund preservation? Is entertainment the price of memory? Or is there something deeply wrong about turning suffering into spectacle? Would you visit a haunted house built on a place where real people suffered for 80 years? Tell us in the comments. And if you want to see more of these forgotten histories, subscribe. We are just getting started.